My family tried to steal my wedding money to give it to my sister because she wanted plastic surgery. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. I need to start this story by saying I genuinely thought my wedding day would be the beginning of something beautiful. And it was for about 72 hours. Then my parents invited me to dinner and asked me to bankroll my sister's plastic surgery with my wedding gift money. Yeah, you read that right. Let me back up. 3 weeks before all this went down, I married the love of my life in this gorgeous ceremony with 120 guests. My husband's family paid for everything, which was incredibly generous, and honestly kind of them considering my parents spent most of the planning process complaining about the venue choices and the fact that we weren't serving their preferred caterer. The day itself was perfect, though. The weather cooperated, nobody got drunk and embarrassing, and we ended up with $15,000 in cash gifts from our guests. $15,000. We were planning to use it for home improvements, maybe finally renovate that nightmare of a kitchen we inherited with the house. So there I am, 3 days post-wedding, still in that honeymoon glow, when my mother calls and asks if I can come to dinner. Just me, not my husband. She said they wanted to have some family time, which should have been my first red flag because my parents aren't exactly the warm and fuzzy type. But I figured maybe they wanted to actually talk about the wedding. Say something nice for once. I told my husband I'd be back in a couple hours, kissed him goodbye, and drove over to their house. My father opened the door, gave me this weird, tight smile, and my mother was already setting the table. My older sister was there too, looking like she'd been crying. She's 34, 2 years older than me, and she'd recently gone through a divorce that was entirely her own fault. She'd been having an affair with her married boss for 2 years. 2 years. Her husband found out, divorced her, and she lost pretty much everything in the settlement because, surprise, infidelity doesn't look good in court. We sat down to eat, and the whole meal was tense. My sister barely looked at me. My parents kept exchanging these glances like they were communicating telepathically. Finally, over dessert, my mother cleared her throat and said, "Vanessa, we need to talk to you about something important." I put down my fork. "Okay." "It's about your sister," my father said. "She's been going through a really difficult time, as you know." I nodded. I did know. She'd been living with our parents for 6 months, unemployed, depressed, and generally making everyone around her miserable with her refusal to take any responsibility for her own choices. "She needs help getting back on her feet," my mother continued, "and we think you're in a position to provide that help." I felt this creeping sensation up my spine. "What kind of help?" My father leaned forward. "The wedding gifts, the $15,000. Your sister needs it more than you do." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're joking." "We're completely serious," my mother said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I knew so well. "You just married into money. Your husband has a good job, you have a house, you don't need that money. Your sister needs to get plastic surgery and some beauty treatments so she can start dating again. She needs to feel good about herself." I stared at them. "You want me to give my wedding gift money to fund my sister's plastic surgery?" "It's not just plastic surgery," my sister said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was thin and bitter. "It's about rebuilding my life. You have everything. You have a husband who actually loves you, a nice house, a stable job. What do I have? Nothing. I lost everything." "You lost everything because you slept with your married boss for 2 years," I said flatly. "That was your choice." "Vanessa," my father snapped, "that's enough. Your sister made mistakes, but family helps family. We gave you a good life, we raised you, and now we're asking you to help your sister when she needs it most." "You didn't pay for my wedding," I pointed out. "My husband's family did. And those gifts were from our guests, to us, as a couple. They weren't given to you to redistribute." My mother's face went red. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you, you're being selfish and cruel. Your sister is suffering and you're sitting there counting your money like some kind of miser." I pulled out my phone and very deliberately started recording. My parents didn't notice at first. They were too busy building up steam. But my sister's eyes widened. "Say that again," I said calmly. "About how I should give you $15,000 of my wedding money so my sister can get plastic surgery to attract men after destroying her marriage through infidelity." Please say it again for clarity. The table went silent. My father's face turned an interesting shade of purple. Are you recording this? My mother whispered. Yes, I said, still recording. Because this is absolutely insane, and I want proof that you actually asked me this. I want proof that you invited me to dinner to tell me I should hand over my wedding gifts because my sister needs a mommy makeover to feel better about herself after blowing up her own life. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. My mother was shouting something about disrespect, my father was demanding I delete the recording, and my sister was crying again. I walked out, got in my car, and sat there for a moment, shaking with laughter and anger in equal measure. Then I drove home, walked in, and showed my husband the recording. He listened to the whole thing, his expression moving from confusion to disbelief to pure amazement. When it finished, he looked at me and said, "Your family is absolutely unhinged." "I know," I said. "I really, really know. The thing is, I thought that would be the end of it." I genuinely believed that once they calmed down and realized how absolutely ridiculous they'd been, they'd back off. I should have known better. I've known these people my entire life. They don't back off. They double down. 2 weeks later, there was a birthday party for one of my cousins. Big family gathering. About 40 people, all the aunts and uncles and cousins and their kids. I almost didn't go, but my husband convinced me it would look worse if I avoided family events. He said we should go, be pleasant, and keep our distance from my parents and sister. Simple plan. We showed up, brought a nice gift, and I was immediately cornered by my mother in the kitchen. She was helping set up the food, and she pulled me aside with this fake, sweet smile on her face. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "I wanted to talk to you about our conversation the other day. I think maybe we came on too strong, but you have to understand. We're just worried about your sister." "Mom," I said, "I'm not giving you the money." Her smile froze. "Vanessa, please. Just think about it. 5,000 would be enough. We're not asking for all of it." "Oh, now it's 5,000? What happened to 15? "We're trying to be reasonable," she hissed. "Your sister is family. She needs help." "Then you help her," I said. "You and Dad have money. You have your retirement savings. If you think she needs plastic surgery so badly, you pay for it." "That's our retirement," she snapped, the pretense dropping instantly. "We're not spending our retirement on this." "You're young. You'll make more money. You can spare 5,000. "No," I said simply. And we're not having this conversation again. I walked away from her and rejoined my husband, who was talking to one of my uncles about sports. My mother followed me out of the kitchen, and I could see my father and sister huddled in the corner, watching us. My mother said something to them, and my father's expression darkened. I knew that look. That was the look he got when he'd made up his mind about something and nothing was going to change it. My husband noticed my tension and put his hand on my lower back, a silent question. I shook my head slightly. Not yet. The party continued around us. Kids were running through the house, someone had put on music, and the birthday cousin was opening gifts in the living room. It should have been pleasant. It should have been normal. But I could feel my parents' eyes on me, could sense the storm building. My sister kept glancing over at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Part resentment, part desperation, part something else I didn't want to name. My aunt, the one who would later tell me about the inheritance incident, came over and squeezed my arm. "You doing okay, honey?" she asked quietly. "Define okay," I said with a weak smile. She glanced over at my parents and her expression tightened. "Your mother's been working herself up about something all day. She called me this morning asking if I thought you'd be here." "Of course I'd be here," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" My aunt just shook her head. "Be careful, Vanessa. When your mother gets like this, she doesn't think straight." About an hour into the party, my father stood up and clinked his glass like he was about to make a toast. Everyone quieted down, expecting some nice speech about the birthday cousin. Instead, he looked directly at me and said, "I'd like to take a moment to talk about family loyalty and what it means to help each other in times of need." The room went still. My husband's hand tightened on mine. My birthday cousin looked confused, clearly not expecting this to be about anything other than his special day. Oh, he was going there. He was actually going there. In front of 40 family members, he was going to try to shame me into compliance. My husband squeezed my hand, but I shook my head. I was done playing defense. Actually, Dad, I said, standing up. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about family loyalty. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the Bluetooth speaker someone had set up for music. My cousin looked confused but didn't stop me. I pulled up the recording and hit play. The entire party listened in dead silence as my parents' voices filled the room, asking me to donate my wedding gift money to my sister's plastic surgery fund. My father's voice saying, "Your sister needs it more than you do." My mother's voice saying, "You just married into money." My sister's bitter voice saying, "You have everything." What do I have? Nothing. The recording played for 3 full minutes. 3 minutes of my parents explaining why I should give away $15,000, then negotiating down to $5,000, then my mother calling me selfish and cruel. You could hear the clink of forks on plates, the tension in everyone's voices, my calm questions and their increasingly hostile answers. When it finished, the silence was deafening. My youngest cousin, who was only 7, whispered loudly, "Did Grandma and Grandpa really say that?" One of my uncles let out a low whistle. Another shook his head slowly, looking between my parents and me with an expression of complete disbelief. You could have heard a pin drop. When it finished, I looked around at all the shocked faces. "So that's what family loyalty looks like to some people," I said. "My parents think I should give them $15,000 in wedding gifts, gifts that many of you gave to me and my husband, so my sister can get cosmetic procedures after she destroyed her own marriage by cheating on her husband with her married boss for 2 years. They think I should do this because I married someone with a stable job, so apparently I don't need money, while my sister needs to look good for her next relationship." My mother had gone completely white. Her hands were shaking. She looked around the room at all the family members staring at her. And I saw something in her face that I'd never seen before. Shame. Actual shame. My sister was openly sobbing, her face buried in her hands. One of my cousins had moved slightly away from her, creating physical distance. My father looked like he wanted to physically attack me. His face was red, a vein throbbing in his temple. His fists clenched at his sides. But my uncle, the one who'd been talking to my husband about sports, stepped between us. He's a big guy, played football in college, and even at 55, he's not someone you want to mess with. "Is this true?" my aunt asked, staring at my parents. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. "Did you really ask her for this?" "This is a private family matter," my father said tightly, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Vanessa had no right to air this publicly." "Private?" I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. "You were about to give a public speech about family loyalty. You were about to shame me in front of everyone here. So yes, I aired it publicly. You want to talk about loyalty? Where was your loyalty to me when you invited me to dinner just to demand my wedding money? Where was your loyalty when you couldn't even be happy for me on my wedding day because you were too busy thinking about how to get money out of me?" "Vanessa." "Please," my sister cried. "You're making everything worse." "I'm making everything worse?" I laughed. "You had an affair. You destroyed your own marriage. You lost your job because you were sleeping with your boss. These are consequences of your own actions, and now you want me to pay for plastic surgery so you can feel better about yourself?" "No, absolutely not." Several of my cousins were nodding. One of my aunts had her hand over her mouth, looking horrified. The birthday cousin just looked extremely uncomfortable that his party had turned into this. My parents grabbed my sister and stormed out of the house. My sister was wailing about how I'd ruined everything, how I was cruel and heartless. The door slammed behind them, and the party was left in this awkward, stunned silence. Then my uncle started laughing. "Well," he said, "that was something." The tension broke, and suddenly people were coming up to me, telling me I'd done the right thing, asking if my parents had really asked for the money. My husband looked both proud and slightly concerned, probably worried about the fallout. But I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I'd said what needed to be said. Later that night, my mother sent me a text message. It was long and rambling, full of accusations about how I'd humiliated them in front of the family, how I'd betrayed their trust by recording a private conversation, how I was tearing the family apart. She said my sister was devastated and it was all my fault. I screenshot the text and posted it on social media with the caption, "When your parents are more upset about being exposed than about what they did in the first place." I didn't tag them or mention them by name, but the family group chat lit up within minutes. More people reached out privately to tell me they'd suspected my parents of favoritism for years, but never had proof. The next morning, my aunt called me. Not just any aunt, but my father's older sister, the family matriarch who everyone respects. She asked if she could come over for coffee. And I said yes, curious about what she wanted. She arrived at 10 in the morning with pastries and a serious expression. We sat at my kitchen table, the one my husband and I were planning to replace with the wedding money, and she folded her hands in front of her. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And I should have told you years ago, but I was trying to keep the peace. That was wrong of me." I waited. "This isn't the first time your parents have tried to redistribute family money to your sister," she said quietly. "When your grandmother died 5 years ago, she left each grandchild $5,000. Do you remember?" I nodded. "I'd used mine as part of my house down payment." "Your cousin Jake also got $5,000, she continued. "Your parents approached him privately and asked him to lend his inheritance to your sister. She needed it for the down payment on a house, they said. It was urgent. They promised she'd pay him back within a year." I felt my stomach drop. "What happened?" "Jake said no. He'd just started his business, he needed that money, and frankly, he didn't trust that your sister would actually pay him back. And he was right not to trust that. Your parents were furious. There was a huge fight at that year's Christmas dinner. Your mother said Jake was selfish. Your father said he was ungrateful for all the times they'd helped him when he was younger. They brought up every favor they'd ever done for him. Every time they'd babysat his kids or helped him move or lent him their car. They kept a score sheet in their heads of everything they'd ever done for anyone, and they called it in all at once." My aunt's voice was bitter, and I realized she'd been carrying this for years. "The family took sides. It was ugly, Vanessa. Really ugly. Some people thought Jake should help family. That blood is thicker than water and all that nonsense. Others thought your parents were completely out of line. There were shouting matches, people stopped talking to each other. That Christmas dinner ended with half the family leaving early and your mother crying in the bathroom." "I don't remember any of this," I said, my mind racing through that year trying to find the gaps. "You were living across the country for that job," my aunt said. "You'd just started dating your husband. You came home for Christmas that year, but you flew in late on Christmas Eve and left the day after. You missed the dinner where everything exploded. Your parents made sure you didn't hear about it because they knew you'd ask questions. They told you that Jake couldn't make it because his kids were sick. They covered it up." She took a sip of her coffee, her hands wrapped around the mug like she was trying to warm herself despite the summer heat outside. "Jake and your parents didn't speak for over a year. Your mother would leave rooms when he entered. Your father refused to go to family events if Jake was invited. It split the family down the middle. Eventually, people got tired of the drama and forced a reconciliation, but it was superficial. They've been civil since then, but the relationship never really recovered. Jake told me privately that he'll never forgive them for trying to manipulate him like that, for weaponizing family connection to get money." "How much of this happened with other people?" I asked quietly. My aunt looked uncomfortable. "I don't have proof of other incidents, but I've heard whispers. Your cousin Marie said your parents asked her to let your sister move in with her rent-free for 6 months. Your Uncle Tom mentioned they tried to get him to hire your sister at his company even though she had no relevant experience. Nothing as blatant as asking for money, but always pushing, always trying to get people to sacrifice something for your sister's benefit." I sat back in my chair, processing this. So they've been doing this for years, trying to funnel money to my sister. "Your sister has always been their favorite," my aunt said. "I think you've known that on some level, but maybe not how deep it goes. They've always bailed her out, always made excuses for her, always expected the rest of the family to do the same. When she had the affair, your mother told me it wasn't really cheating because her husband didn't pay enough attention to her. When she lost her job, your father blamed her boss for not being professional enough to stop the relationship. They never hold her accountable for anything," I said. "No," my aunt agreed. "And they've created an adult child who can't function independently. But that's not your problem to fix. You were right to expose them. Someone needed to, and I'm ashamed it wasn't me." She left an hour later, and I felt validated but also deeply sad. My entire childhood suddenly made more sense. The way my achievements were downplayed while my sisters were celebrated. The way my problems were dismissed while hers required family intervention. The way I learned to be independent because I had to be, while my sister learned she'd always be rescued. That evening, my husband and I sat on the couch and talked about whether we should reach out to my parents or just let things cool down. We decided on cooling down. We weren't going to chase reconciliation with people who thought we owed them money for existing. What we didn't know was that the situation was about to get much, much worse for my sister. The family drama had spread beyond just our family. Some people at her old company heard about the affair through their own family connections to ours, and apparently there was an investigation. Her boss had been promoted recently, and there were questions about whether the affair had influenced any decisions. The company didn't find anything concrete, but they did decide they didn't want the drama, and they let my sister go from a contract position she'd started at a different branch. She blamed me, of course. Sent me a long email about how I'd destroyed her reputation, how I'd made it impossible for her to find work, how I'd ruined her life out of spite. She didn't mention the affair. She didn't mention the choices she'd made. It was all about what I'd done to her by refusing to be quiet and compliant. I didn't respond to the email. What was there to say? She'd created her own mess, and now she was drowning in it. My parents tried one more approach about 3 weeks after the birthday party disaster. They suggested a video call, all four of us, to clear the air and move forward as a family. My husband advised against it, but I was curious about what they'd say, so I agreed. The video call was exactly as painful as expected. My parents immediately launched into how hurt they were, how embarrassed they'd been, how I'd gone too far by recording them and playing it publicly. They wanted an apology. An apology for what? I asked. For not giving you my wedding money? For humiliating us, my mother said. For making us look bad in front of the entire family. You made yourselves look bad, I said. I just provided evidence. This is getting us nowhere, my father said. Your sister wants to say something. The camera shifted to show my sister, red-eyed and miserable looking. She took a breath and said, I never asked you for the money directly. I just told Mom and Dad I was feeling insecure about dating again, and they took it upon themselves to ask you. This got blown out of proportion. I stared at the screen. So you're saying you had no idea they were going to ask me for $15,000 for your plastic surgery? I didn't ask for $15,000, she said. I just said I wished I could afford some procedures to feel better about myself. They decided to approach you. I can't control what they do. But you were there at the dinner, I pointed out. You were sitting right there when they asked me. You didn't say, no, I never asked for this. Don't put this on Vanessa. You sat there crying about how you'd lost everything and I had everything. She looked away. I was emotional. I wasn't thinking clearly. This is bullshit, I said. You all coordinated this. You all agreed I should give you the money. And now you're trying to rewrite history because it didn't work. Language, my father said sharply. I'm hanging up now, I said. We're not doing this. You want an apology? You owe me one. You owe me about 32 years of apologies for all the ways you favored my sister and made me feel like I didn't matter unless I was useful to her. But I'm not holding my breath. I ended the call. My husband hugged me while I cried angry tears, frustrated that I'd let them get to me again. Frustrated that I'd hoped for anything different. The following months were quieter, but the tension never fully disappeared. My parents and I maintained a cold distance. We'd see each other at mandatory family events and be polite. But there was no real relationship there anymore. My sister stopped contacting me entirely, which was honestly a relief. My husband and I went ahead with our kitchen renovation. We hired a contractor, picked out new cabinets and countertops, and spent about $12,000 of the wedding money on creating the kitchen I'd always wanted. Every time I cooked in that space, I felt satisfaction knowing I'd used that money for us, not for my sister's questionable life choices. I went back to teaching full-time after the summer break. My students were a welcome distraction from family drama. Third graders don't care about your complicated family dynamics. They just want to learn about dinosaurs and complain about homework. It was refreshingly simple. Meanwhile, my sister apparently decided she needed an emotional support animal. She'd moved out of my parents' house finally into a small one-bedroom apartment across town, and she thought a dog would help with her loneliness and depression. The problem was, she didn't do any research. She didn't think about her lifestyle, her work schedule, or the costs involved. She saw a breeder online selling designer puppies for $3,000 and bought one impulsively. The dog was some kind of poodle mix, high energy, required constant attention, and she had zero experience with dogs. Within 2 weeks, her apartment was destroyed. The puppy chewed through furniture, had accidents everywhere because my sister wasn't home enough to properly house train it, and barked constantly, leading to noise complaints from neighbors. My mother called me about it, which was surprising since we'd barely spoken in months. "Your sister is overwhelmed with the dog," she said. "She's really struggling." "Okay," I said, waiting for the request. "We were thinking you and your husband might be willing to take the dog. You have a house with a yard." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. "Mom, no, absolutely not. She bought the dog. She can deal with the dog." "She made a mistake," my mother said. "She's trying to rehome it responsibly. Then she can take it to a shelter or contact a rescue organization," I said. "But she's not giving it to me. I don't want a dog right now, and even if I did, I wouldn't take one from her." "You're so cruel," my mother said sadly. "I don't know when you became so heartless." "I became realistic," I said. "There's a difference." She hung up on me. 2 days later, I heard from my aunt again. Apparently, my sister had solved her dog problem by just dropping it off at my parents' house while they were at work. She used her old key, left the puppy in their living room with some food and water, and left a note saying she'd be back to pick it up in a few days. She just needed a break. The dog destroyed their house. And I mean destroyed. My parents had spent 30 years collecting things. Decorative plates from every country they'd visited, displayed on special shelves in the dining room. Crystal glassware inherited from my father's mother, kept in an antique cabinet with glass doors. A collection of first edition books in my father's study. Furniture they'd saved for years to buy, including a cream-colored sectional sofa that had cost them $3,000. The puppy, left alone and anxious for 8 hours, went on an absolute rampage that would have been almost impressive if it wasn't so devastating. The decorative plates were the first casualties. The dog had somehow knocked over one of the display shelves, sending 40 plates crashing to the ground. Some were just chipped, but most were completely shattered. My mother's favorite, a hand-painted plate from their trip to Portugal for their 25th anniversary, was in pieces so small they couldn't even be glued back together. The crystal cabinet was next. The puppy had jumped at the glass doors repeatedly, either trying to get to something inside or just panicking, and eventually the glass shattered. Then the dog walked through the broken glass and into the cabinet, knocking over wine glasses and champagne flutes and decanters. The whole area was a minefield of broken glass and crystal shards mixed with dog hair and paw prints. In my father's study, the puppy had discovered the joy of paper. Important documents, family photos, first edition books, tax records. Everything was either chewed, shredded, or scattered across the room. My father had a complete collection of classic science fiction novels, some of them signed by the authors, and the dog had used them as chew toys. The leather bindings were torn, pages ripped out, covers destroyed. The cream sofa was perhaps the worst. The puppy had not only chewed through 2 of the cushions, leaving foam everywhere like it had snowed indoors, but had also had multiple accidents on it. The smell was apparently unbearable. And the damage was so extensive that the furniture company said it couldn't be repaired or even professionally cleaned. It was a total loss. The kitchen was a disaster zone of a different kind. The puppy had somehow opened the pantry door and dragged out everything within reach. Bags of flour were torn open and spread across the floor. Boxes of pasta were scattered everywhere. A bottle of olive oil had been knocked over and shattered, leaving a slick, greasy mess. The dog had eaten some chocolate chips and had gotten sick, adding vomit to the already apocalyptic scene. Food from the pantry was dragged everywhere, mixed with dog hair and paw prints tracked through the various disasters. There were muddy paw prints on the walls, on the furniture, on the curtains. It looked like a tornado had hit the house, except the tornado was a 15-pound puppy with separation anxiety and zero training. My parents arrived home from work at 6 in the evening, tired and looking forward to a quiet night. My father unlocked the door, stepped inside, and literally froze. My mother, right behind him, let out a sound my aunt later described as something between a scream and a wail. They stood in the doorway for a full minute, just staring at the destruction, unable to process what they were seeing. The puppy, hearing them come home, came running and jumping, happy to see them, completely oblivious to the chaos it had created. My father looked at the dog, looked at the house, and his face went through about 6 different emotions before settling on pure rage. My mother was already on the phone, calling my sister, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. When my sister answered, my mother didn't even say hello. She just said, "Get over here right now and explain what you've done to our house." Furious, didn't even begin to cover how my parents felt. They called my sister, told her to come get the dog immediately, and when she showed up 2 hours later, strolling in like she had all the time in the world, she was completely unapologetic. She looked around at the destruction, shrugged, and said, "I guess he had some anxiety. You should have taken him for a walk or something." "You broke into our house," my father said, according to my aunt who heard all this secondhand from a neighbor. "I didn't break in. I used my key," my sister said. "Your old key, which you were supposed to return when you moved out," my mother said. They demanded she pay for the damages. My sister refused, saying it was an accident and they should just file an insurance claim. My parents said if she didn't pay, they'd file a police report for the break-in and destruction of property. This is where things got truly insane. My parents ended up giving the dog to a coworker of my father's who had experience with high-energy breeds. They didn't tell my sister, just rehomed the dog and told her after the fact. My sister completely lost it. She threatened to sue them for theft, said the dog was her property, said they had no right. My father told her if she wanted to pursue legal action, he'd counter with charges for breaking and entering and destruction of property. He had photos of everything, and the neighbor had seen her car in the driveway during the day when she'd dropped off the dog. They were at a complete stalemate. My sister couldn't afford a lawyer, my parents were done bailing her out, and the dog was gone to a better situation. My aunt called me to fill me in on all of this, and I just sat there on my renovated kitchen counter, listening to the absolute circus my family had become, and felt nothing but relief that I wasn't involved. "Are you okay?" my aunt asked. "I'm fine," I said honestly. "I'm actually really, really fine. Is that terrible?" "No," she said. "It's healthy. You removed yourself from a toxic situation. That's the right thing to do." But my sister wasn't done. She couldn't accept that her parents had actually stood up to her for once in her life. She'd grown up being bailed out, excused, and supported no matter what she did. And suddenly there were consequences. She couldn't handle it. She tracked down the coworker who'd adopted the dog. She found his address through some online stalking, drove to his house, and when she saw the dog in the backyard, she literally went into the yard and took it. Just opened the gate and walked out with the dog while the family was inside having dinner. They had security cameras, they called the police. The whole thing was caught on video. My sister was charged with theft and trespassing. The dog, who had been with this new family for 3 weeks and was clearly happy and well-adjusted, showed no excitement at seeing my sister. That detail killed me when I heard it. The dog didn't even care. She had to go to court, got fined $500, and was ordered to pay restitution to the family for emotional distress and legal fees. Another $700. The judge also ruled that the dog would remain with the new family since my sister had demonstrated she couldn't care for it properly and had committed a crime to retrieve it. My sister tried to fight it, tried to argue that she'd only asked my parents to watch the dog temporarily, but she couldn't prove that. My parents had photos of the destruction, documentation of the costs, and her own note that said, "Back in a few days," which the judge said indicated abandonment. She lost everything. The case, the money she didn't have, the dog, and whatever remaining respect anyone had for her judgment. My parents were horrified, not at my sister, but at the situation and how it reflected on them. My father's coworker quit shortly after, not wanting to work with someone whose daughter had stolen from him. My father faced workplace gossip and awkwardness for months. You'd think this would be the wake-up call my parents needed to see that they'd enabled my sister into complete dysfunction. But no. They blamed the coworker for pressing charges. They blamed the judge for being harsh. They blamed me, somehow, for starting all this by not giving my sister the money in the first place, which they claimed had sent her into a spiral. My aunt told me they'd tried to say in a family group text that if I'd just helped my sister when they'd asked, none of this would have happened. She'd have had money for therapy and better life choices. Several family members shut that down immediately. My cousin Jake, the one who'd refused to loan his inheritance years ago, sent a message that said, "Or maybe if you'd taught her accountability 30 years ago, she'd be a functional adult now." My uncle added, "Vanessa isn't responsible for her sister's choices. Stop trying to make her the villain in a story where your daughter committed actual crimes." My parents left the group chat. 1 year after my wedding, my life had never been better. The kitchen renovation was complete, and I loved cooking in that space. My husband and I had started talking seriously about having kids. My career was going well. I'd gotten a small promotion at the school. Everything felt stable and peaceful. The family grapevine, through my aunt, kept me informed of my sister's situation. She'd been kicked out by my parents after the dog disaster. Apparently, the final straw was when she'd complained about having to pay the court fines and suggested my parents should cover them since they'd created the situation by rehoming the dog. My father, for the first time in my memory, told her no. Told her she was an adult and needed to face consequences for her own actions. Told her she couldn't live with them anymore if she wasn't going to take responsibility for herself. She'd moved in with a friend, then wore out her welcome there within 2 months. She'd asked several family members if she could stay with them. Everyone said no. My cousin told her she should have thought about burning bridges before she lit so many fires. The last I heard, she was living in a studio apartment, working retail, and barely making rent. My parents had apparently started going to therapy, finally recognizing that their parenting approach with her had been destructive. Too little. Too late, in my opinion. But at least it was something. Then, after months of silence, my father called me. I almost didn't answer. My husband raised his eyebrows when he saw the caller ID. I took a breath and picked up. "Vanessa," my father said. His voice sounded older, tired. "I'm calling to tell you that your mother and I have been in therapy, and we've come to understand some things about how we treated you and your sister differently." I waited. "We were wrong," he continued. "We enabled your sister and took you for granted. We assumed you'd always be fine because you were independent, and we didn't see how that independence came from you not being able to rely on us. We're sorry." It was the apology I'd wanted for over a year, maybe for my entire life. And sitting there in my beautiful kitchen, in the home I'd built with my husband, I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I appreciate it. We'd like to rebuild our relationship with you," he said. "If you're willing to try." "I'll think about it," I said. "But I need you to understand something. I'm happy now. I have a life that works for me. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be healthy and equal. I'm not going to be the person you call when you need something. I'm not going to be expected to fix things or smooth things over or put myself last. If you can accept that, then maybe we can talk." "That's fair," he said quietly. We talked for a few more minutes. He told me about therapy, about realizing how much damage they'd done to both of their daughters, just in different ways. He said my mother wanted to call too, but was afraid I wouldn't answer. "I need time," I told him. "This doesn't get fixed with one conversation." "I know," he said. After we hung up, my husband asked how I felt. "Honestly," I said, "I don't know. Part of me wants to believe they've changed. Part of me thinks this is just another manipulation. But mostly, I just feel okay with not knowing. I don't need them to be different for me to be happy." We decided to use the last of the wedding money to start preparing for a baby. We converted the spare room into a nursery, bought paint and furniture, started planning for the future we wanted. We were building something new, something that was entirely ours. My mother did call, eventually. She left a voicemail that was tearful and apologetic, asking if we could have coffee sometime. I listened to it twice, then saved it and didn't respond immediately. Not out of cruelty, but because I wanted to make sure I was responding from a healthy place and not from that old desperate need for parental approval. My aunt hosted a family dinner 2 months after my father's call. She asked if I'd come, said it would be small, just close family, and my parents would be there but would understand if I didn't want to talk to them. I went. My husband came with me, which made it easier. My parents were subdued, polite. They didn't corner me or make demands. They asked about the house, about my work, about normal things. It was superficial but not hostile. My sister wasn't there, which everyone seemed relieved about. At one point, my mother approached me in the kitchen. "Your father told you we've been in therapy," she said. "He did," I said. "I want you to know that I'm working on understanding why I favored your sister," she said. "My therapist says it's because I saw myself in her struggles and saw your father in your competence, and I overcorrected for my own insecurities. That's not an excuse, just an explanation." "Okay," I said. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, "but I hope, eventually, we can have some kind of relationship." I'd like to know my future grandchildren. That last part got me, because yes, I was pregnant, only 6 weeks along, hadn't told anyone yet except my husband and my doctor. But the idea of my mother knowing my children made me deeply uncomfortable. Maybe, I said. We'll see. She nodded and walked away. Driving home that night, my husband asked what I was thinking. I'm thinking that I'm glad I stood my ground, I said. I'm glad I didn't give them the money. I'm glad I exposed the favoritism. Because if I hadn't, I'd still be in that cycle, still trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely. And now? He asked. Now I'm free, I said. They can change or not change. They can be part of my life or not. But my happiness doesn't depend on them anymore. 3 months later, I was showing, and we announced the pregnancy to the family. My parents sent a card and a small gift, nothing extravagant, with a note that said they were happy for us. I sent a thank you text. It was civil, appropriate, distant. My sister sent nothing, which was expected. I heard through family that she'd finally gotten a better job, was seeing a therapist, and was slowly getting her life together. I was genuinely glad for her, but I had no desire to be part of that process. The last significant interaction came when my sister apparently told my parents she wanted to apologize to me. My father called and asked if I'd be willing to meet with her, maybe with them present as mediators. I thought about it for a full week, talked it through with my husband, with my therapist, with my aunt. And finally, I decided no. I don't need her apology, I told my father on the phone. Maybe she needs to give it for her own healing, and that's fine. But I don't need to receive it. I've moved on. I'm not angry at her anymore, I'm just indifferent. And honestly, that's the healthiest place I've ever been regarding her. I understand, my father said. He sounded disappointed, but not angry. If she wants to apologize, she can write a letter, I said. But I'm not meeting with her. I'm not putting myself in a position where I have to manage her emotions or reassure her that she's forgiven. She made her choices, I made mine, and we're both living with the results. That's fair, he said. I never got a letter. Either she didn't write one or my parents convinced her not to send it. I didn't ask. My daughter was born on a sunny Tuesday in April. We named her something entirely new, not after any family member, not carrying the weight of family history or expectations. She was perfect, healthy, and when I held her for the first time, I felt this overwhelming sense of protection wash over me. I looked at my husband, tears streaming down my face, and said, "She's never going to wonder if we love her. She's never going to question if she's good enough. She's never going to feel like she has to earn our approval or compete for our attention." Never, he agreed, his own eyes wet as he looked at our daughter. And I meant it. I thought about my own childhood, about the constant comparison to my sister, about feeling invisible when I succeeded because my success was expected, about feeling inadequate when I struggled because I was supposed to be the capable one. I thought about my sister, raised to believe that other people would always fix her problems, never learning to stand on her own. Both of us damaged in different ways by parents who couldn't see past their own issues. I made a promise to my daughter in that moment. She would grow up knowing unconditional love. She would grow up understanding that actions have consequences, but also that mistakes don't define her worth. She would grow up with parents who celebrated her achievements without using them as currency, who supported her through failures without enabling destructive behavior. She would grow up whole in a way neither my sister nor I had been allowed to be. My parents asked if they could visit in the hospital. I said no, not yet. Maybe in a few weeks, once we were settled at home. My mother sounded hurt on the phone, and part of me felt guilty for that hurt. That old programming, that voice that said I was being cruel, that said family should forgive and forget and move on. But a stronger, healthier voice reminded me that protecting my daughter's peace was more important than managing my mother's feelings. They accepted it, which surprised me. No guilt trips, no manipulation, just a quiet, "Okay, we understand." Maybe therapy was actually working. Maybe they were actually changing. Or maybe they just learned that the old tactics didn't work on me anymore. When they finally did meet their granddaughter, 3 weeks after she was born, they were appropriate. They brought a thoughtful gift, a handmade quilt from a local artist. They stayed for exactly 30 minutes, held the baby gently, spoke quietly, asked permission before taking photos. My mother cried a little, but she didn't make it dramatic or demanding. She just said, "She's beautiful, Vanessa. You're going to be a wonderful mother." And then they left without drama, without trying to extend the visit, without pushing for more. It was strange, seeing them be careful around me, treating me like someone they had to earn trust from rather than someone who owed them compliance. My father, who had always been so domineering, asked if he could hold the baby instead of just taking her from my arms. My mother, who had always had opinions about everything, complimented the nursery without suggesting a single change. They were on their best behavior. And while part of me was glad, another part was sad that it had taken this much damage, this much pain, to get here. As I'm writing this, my daughter is 6 months old. My parents have seen her 4 times. Always at our house, always with my husband present, always brief visits. We're rebuilding something, but it's not what we had before. It's more honest, but more distant. They're grandparents, not parents. They're people I know, not people I depend on. My sister and I haven't spoken since before my wedding. I blocked her number after she sent that long email blaming me for her job loss. I've seen her exactly once, at a family funeral 3 months ago, and we nodded at each other from across the room and said nothing. People sometimes ask if I regret exposing the situation, if I wish I'd handled it more privately. The answer is no. Playing that recording at the birthday party was the moment I stopped letting my family gaslight me into thinking their dysfunction was normal. It was the moment I chose myself. I'm not a perfect person. I'm not the hero of this story. I'm just someone who got tired of being treated like an emotional and financial ATM by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I'm someone who decided that peace was more important than keeping the peace. The money from our wedding? We used it exactly how we wanted to. Kitchen renovation, baby furniture, the beginning of our family's life. Every time I cooked dinner in that kitchen or put my daughter to bed in the nursery we created. I know we made the right choice. My sister needed to hit bottom before she could start rebuilding. My parents needed to see the consequences of their favoritism. I needed to learn that loving people doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for them. And here's what I know now. Sitting in my living room with my daughter sleeping in my arms and my husband reading beside me, I am enough. I always was. The people who made me feel like I wasn't were the ones with the problem, not me. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents or my sister. Maybe we'll find our way to something healthier. Maybe we won't. But either way, I'm okay. I have the family I built with my husband. I have friends who show up for me. I have a life that feels like mine. And that's exactly what I wanted on my wedding day, a year and a half ago, when I was still naive enough to think the hardest part was behind me. It turned out the hardest part was choosing myself over the comfortable misery of family dysfunction. But I did it. And I do it again. The $15,000 my parents wanted for my sister's plastic surgery is gone now, spent on things that actually mattered. A kitchen where we make memories, a nursery where our daughter sleeps safely, a life that belongs to us. That money was a gift, and we honored it by using it to build our happiness, not to subsidize someone else's refusal to grow up. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd given them the money. Would my sister have gotten her plastic surgery and found a new boyfriend and lived happily ever after? Would my parents have been satisfied and left me alone? I doubt it. There would have been another crisis, another emergency, another reason I needed to help. The cycle only broke because I broke it. My aunt told me last week that my parents have been attending therapy regularly for almost a year now. They're working through their issues, understanding patterns from their own childhoods that led them to favor my sister. My mother apparently came from a family where love was conditional, and she never wanted that for her kids, so she overcompensated by accepting everything my sister did. My father grew up being told he wasn't good enough, so he dismissed my achievements because they came easily to me, and he didn't understand struggle could look different. It's all very psychological and probably true, but it doesn't change the past. It doesn't undo the years of feeling invisible, the wedding day that should have been purely happy, but was overshadowed by their disappointment that the money wasn't available for my sister, the dinner where they casually asked for $15,000 like it was nothing. Healing is possible, but some damage is permanent. We're all living in the aftermath of choices that were made long before that dinner, that recording, that birthday party confrontation. We're all dealing with the consequences. The difference is, I'm dealing with them on my terms now. My husband just looked over my shoulder to see what I was writing, and he laughed. "You're really documenting all of this?" "Someone should," I said. Maybe our daughter will read it one day and understand why we kept her grandparents at a distance. Maybe she'll understand that sometimes loving people means setting boundaries, even when those people are family. She'll understand, he said. Because we'll teach her that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who show up for you, who celebrate your successes, who don't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. He's right. That's the lesson in all of this. That's what I learned over $15,000 and one absolutely insane year of family drama. You don't owe anyone your happiness. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone your money, your time, or your emotional labor just because you share DNA. You owe yourself the life you want to live. I built that life. And no one, not my parents, not my sister, not anyone, is going to make me feel guilty for it anymore.